there are certain principles, and you hit on a couple of these, that apply to all of the phases. And then I'll talk about those. And implementation may be different, but the principle applies. Okay? For example, in all phases, there's a notion of evidence preservation. You have to do the right thing with evidence at every phase. When you're dealing with it, when you're collecting it on site, you have to do something. When you're transporting it back, you have to do something. When you're doing analysis, you have to do something. When you're retiring the case, you have to do something with the evidence. That's what I mean to say that all of the phases include some notion of evidence preservation. That digital evidence deals mostly with checksums. You can run a checksum on a whole disk so that when the defense or somebody else looks at the disk, they can verify that they're starting at the same point that you are and reproduce whatever it is that they're trying to do. And so you may have evidence handling forms, you may have evidence containers. For example, the things in the back next to the cameras are what are called Pelican cases, so that you can ship them in a plane and you can lock them and the materials won't be destroyed in process. We have many of those in our flyaway kits that we either ship or put in the back of a big van, or if we rent a van. Cabinets, logs, etc. And this is one of these where if you don't handle this stuff correctly at some phase, you can expect that a sharp attorney, and attorneys, I think it's fair to say, are getting sharper, can get that stuff thrown out, and then the case is over. Documentation, somebody else mentioned document and photograph. It's important to document everything all the time. But this is, you talked about terse versus not terse. It's good to document at a more terse level, I think, at this point. Because I think this documentation, I haven't done this forever, and I haven't been involved in all phases. But I think what can happen is this documentation can be subpoenaed. So if you have more information in it than simply, I did this, I did this, I did this, you may put yourself in a bad light. So what you document is, I did this, this is when I did it, and initial it. So it's brief and terse, but specific. It's a good thing to do. Date and time stamp, describe. And the key thing in any of your documentation is what you found. You want to keep personal opinion out of this. These are findings. I found this. I found these credit cards in this file on this disk from this site. As I say, notes can be subpoenaed, date, time stamp, and initial everything. A proper investigative authority. I mentioned this. Does the warrant allow me to do? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? A real-time interception, meaning something like doing network monitoring and capturing traffic, versus stored communications are different laws. You all know these. Many of you know these better than I do. Content versus header. And we'll talk about, when we talk about capturing network content, we'll talk about this notion of net flow, information versus headers from TCP. Knowing what the appropriate laws are that apply and what challenges there are if you're not in a U.S. jurisdiction where the laws are different. Decide what you need to capture and then look for laws. That's a good question. You know, if this is a machine that multiple people are using, it's an ESX server running multiple, can I capture physical memory? No, I can't, because it's going to have other things that are not in the warrant. Working with so I don't even try to look for these. I understand them in general, but we work with our legal people to find out what we're allowed to do, so it's good to have them available. Yes?
On your previous slide, can you elaborate the difference between expressing facts and then drawing conclusions, the expert witness business?
It is my understanding that as an analyst, what you're doing is you're capturing findings. I found this. Where typically expert witnesses will say, this means this, and to draw more conclusion-based stuff, or it could mean this, et cetera, et cetera. Can anybody add anything else to that?
I think you are allowed to draw conclusions based on your experience, but the judge needs to certify you as an expert.
Okay.
If they certify you as a forensic analysis expert on the stand, then you're allowed to input your opinion or your theories behind it.
Okay. I have not functioned that role. Many of us back at the office have not. We write reports and give them to law enforcement. I think only one person in the time that I've been doing this has functioned in the capacity of an expert witness in a trial. So I don't have a lot of experience in that.
As an examiner, if you're asked to testify, you'll be asked specific questions that you'll have to draw conclusions on.
Okay. So that's all of this stuff is, can I do the right thing at the right time, and are you allowed to do it? What's the investigative authority? Those principles apply at all points. Constitution also enters into this in the various amendments and stuff, et cetera, et cetera. I am not a lawyer. I have not played one on TV, and I won't pretend to be one. But I know that I don't know this, and I know where to find the information of the people who do. And I think that's the important point. These are the U.S. criminal codes in terms of these laws that apply. Federal rules of evidence also get involved in this. And again, look these things up to give you a good explanation of the hearsay rule, authentication, reliability, and best evidence, and what those mean. And I won't confuse you by attempting to give you my interpretation of those. There's lots of internet resources that will explain them in more detail. So there's all of these other rules and regulations that need to be dealt with in terms of privacy, in terms of data retention, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm trying to do on these slides is to simply say, here's some topics that you need to go off and research and understand some of the issues associated with them. That's the important part here. Another investigative principle is this whole notion of at all points in the process, there may be room for improvement. So it's important to keep track of this worked well on site. You know, we did this technique to do this. We didn't have these materials with us. We didn't have these skills, et cetera, et cetera. And so the next time we do a flyaway mission, we have to do this better. These tools didn't work right, et cetera, et cetera. Taking into account all the processes, practices, and procedures, technologies, and investigative management. And the key point here is to not make the same mistake twice. What I told the people who work for me at Princeton was it's only a mistake if you do it twice. Because it's experimenting if you do it once and you didn't know any better. But if you then did the same thing again and you should have known better, then it's a mistake and that's a problem. Because I wanted to encourage my people to experiment, to try to do something that they didn't know how to do, and kind of remove from them the challenge of getting in heaps of trouble. So now let's delve into these individual phases, and you talked about this in some respects. What are the kinds of things you want to do in advance? Nobody said to me, one of the things I was hoping that somebody might say is, what kind of system is that this web server is on? Could you have figured that out in advance? What do you think? Yes.
On the packet, you basically can see.
Okay. Can you think of a tool that you might use to do that reconnaissance? Nmap is one. Okay. How about anybody deal with an undercover network? Do you do any undercover stuff from an electronic perspective? Has anybody used Tor? Do you know what Tor is? Tor is basically a VPN-based anonymous, you come out somewhere on the network, non-attribution, which is you're going to send some packets, and Nmap is one tool that runs under Windows, runs under Linux, runs under Mac OS, where you can send packets to a target anonymously, meaning not representing the organization that you're part of, and based on the way the information comes back and the patterns, you can learn about the type of machine that you're going after. So having a non-attribution network is a good thing, so that when you get this mission comes up, you can know your enemy. You can understand what they are. Other ways to do this is, if you know a domain name from the machine and the people on it, you may be able to look at well-known mailing list repositories and see if maybe a system administrator representing that site with that email address has sent a question to a list saying, how do I do this? And they might give you configuration information. On the CERT website, and I think they're still there, they just may be hard to find, are a collection of stories called Larry stories, because Larry wrote them. And one of them talks about being aware of when you ask a question on the internet, you may be giving away a lot of information. So imagine you're a system administrator who's having a problem with a piece of software. and you have to fix that piece of software quickly. So you send out a note to other system administrators on the network, and you say, I have such and such a machine at such and such a patch level and revision. I have such and such an application at patch level, and I can't get it to do this. So now what you've told is anybody who's reading that mailing list everything about your configuration. And maybe you put in a signature line with an with a phone number. Remember War Games, the movie War Games, demon dialing through an exchange. So you may have, simply by asking a question on the internet, you may be giving away a lot of information about your site. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. All I'm saying is to understand what it is that you're doing. So you may be able to use those type of resources to do some even not even passive reconnaissance of who it is that you're trying to investigate. You may get lucky. Yes?
Sometimes the name of the server itself, like a naming convention, might give you a lot of information.
Like Linux 01 or something like that?
Whether it's part of a farm,
yeah.
Whether, it's 3 out of 5, or
yes.
East Coast. Or
yeah. So there's lots of ways that you don't even have to send any packets if you look for available information. The point is, and somebody else also said, floor plans, all of this, maybe there's an electronic floor plan. Maybe you can figure all of this out in advance. Another show that was a Canadian show that was called, can't think what it was called, but whenever, it was a SWAT team, Canadian SWAT team, Flashpoint. Flashpoint was the name of the TV show. They had it in their processes that when they were dealing with the site, they wanted to know the floor plans, they wanted to know the electrical diagrams, they wanted to know everything about the building. These were police who were doing physical things. And so you can do the same kinds of things there. Imaging equipment, hardware, software, tool building, internet connectivity, reach back. Now what's meant about that is, imagine that you've done some reconnaissance and you've decided that the machine is a FreeBSD 8 machine. And so eventually you're going to go on site, and you talked about capturing memory, you talked about capturing the disk, and so you need a collection of tools. Now your analysis, your reconnaissance said it was a FreeBSD 8 system. Now you get out to the site and you find out it's a FreeBSD 6 system. And the tools that you compiled and brought with you on CDs, thumb drives, what have you, don't work under FreeBSD 6. What are you going to do? I mean, you're on site, you're now in Denver, and you got to deal with that, because that's the reality of the situation. Been there, done that. This actually happens.
Leverage the system itself and whatever tools might be on the system to form the least invasive collection that you can do.
That's one thing. What we have done is that we actually take VMs with us, where we'll actually go off and take a whole variety of VMs with us. Oh, we need FreeBSD 6. That's this disk. I plug into this machine, boot up VMware, recompile DC3DD to do an image, spin it off onto USB. So we have a capability for building tools on the fly, is what I'm saying. And what I'm meaning here is by having internet connectivity and reach back, maybe what you do is you have a capability where you have somebody back in the office who has access to all of the VMs and can build you what you need. And then you have that reach back, like anybody ever use Dropbox, the Dropbox application, or some other cloud storage? They can get you that information. They built it with a VM back in the office, throw it in Dropbox. You pull it out of Dropbox, throw it on your USB device, and you can do the next thing. So that requires a couple of things. You have reach back, and you have internet connectivity. So that means you have some portable internet connectivity with you. Okay? For example, a MiFi on Verizon, which is the hotspot, or my phone will do a hotspot or something like that. So independent of where I am, I have the ability to get to the internet. Maybe I know where the local Paneras and Starbucks are. Maybe that's good enough if it's an encrypted asset. So the point is I have some ability to call plays at the line of scrimmage. I'm not dead. And I can rebuild my tools as I need them once I'm out in the field. That's the point of all of this. But you have to do this in advance, which is why it's in the preparation phase. That's the point. Makes sense? So you're not, because I can guarantee that no matter what you've done in advance, it will not be 100% correct. You will have to do something you didn't expect in the field. So preparing yourself to do that unexpected thing is the position you want to be in. So you're going to, in advance, you're also going to build your analysis environment. So when you bring stuff back, you can analyze it, whatever that means. And we'll talk more about that in the future. Physical storage. I've got to store evidence. So I need safes. I need people to be able to gain access to safes, et cetera, et cetera. Some workspace, and I'll show you some pictures of our workspace. Maybe some of the material is classified. So you may have to have a classified workspace to deal with this. And then policy procedures for checking in, doing all of these things. All of this, there's a really big upfront cost and effort before somebody gets on a plane to fly out to Denver. And that's all in the preparation phase. Anything anybody wants to add to the preparation phase that you've done in your world? Then I talk about these in more detail. Great. Reconnaissance capability. Talk about open source information, probes and scans, and you build your tools. You want to go away with a set of tools that are already customized. You'll still have unknowns, which is the purpose of those. Imaging equipment. Somebody talks about Tableau. This is a Tableau device. Essentially, what you're trying to do is if you're going to image a disk, you've got to be able to connect it to something to image it. You have to have the something to connect it to. Firewire, USB 123, SATA, what have you. You need to take all that stuff with you. Evidence disk, connectors, images, imaging software, etc., power cords. You know, there's a lot of stuff. As soon as you don't have one of these things out there, you go, oh, man, I wish I had that with me. Note-taking paraphernalia. Maybe that's books and pens and pencils. Maybe you want to take some kind of a support person with you who can find this, or somebody who owns the equipment when they're on site. Portable secure internet access. It's not just good enough to have the equipment. People know how to be able to operate the equipment once they're out there. And then retraining as the equipment changes. Now, one of the other things, and it didn't make it in these slides because I didn't think of it until last week, is this notion of what I'll call a mission book. We call these things missions. This was a flyaway mission to Denver to do this activity. So the mission book has the search warrant, has all of the contact information. In our case, we work with law enforcement, so I want to have all the names of all of the law enforcement people that we're working with. I want names, I want email addresses, I want office phones, I want cell phones, all of that kind of stuff. Plus, I want to know the address and the phone number of the hotel, because son of a gun, the imaging is taking twice as long and we need to be here 3 days more. So I got to call and extend my reservation. And the rental car company and the airport. And you also talked about maps of where I'm going to be. What I want to know in addition to those maps is where's the local Best Buy? Where's the local Target? Where's the local Walmart? I need to buy more discs. I need to buy a different kind of adapter. A lot of this stuff you can figure out in advance and have it in a notebook that you can look through, because what you want is your high cost people who are actually doing the work to be able to call a play at the line of the scrimmage efficiently and say, we need this kind of an eSATA controller. Best Buy has them. The Best Buy is two miles over here. Here's the GPS. Here's the address. Go buy it and come back so we can continue working. A lot of that stuff can be figured out in advance. I think it belongs in a mission book that then gets filed with part of the case so that you can do what you need to do. And you probably can have a support person or stuff do a lot of the mundane things of printing out maps, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a GPS in our kit. We have cameras in our kit, digital cameras, et cetera, et cetera. Analysis environment, setting this up, and we'll talk more about this. When you get it back, you've got to do all these things. You've got to have a place to analyze all those things you're doing. Physical storage, workspace, et cetera. So thinking about the analysis environment best practice. Maybe it's fortified space. Maybe there's vaults for storing information. There needs to be some notion of access control. Who can get into this space? Some type of an alarm system, some type of a logging system so that you can see who's in there, lest that be challenged, et cetera, et cetera. Our analysis environment, which I'll show you some pictures of shortly, is air-gapped by and large. Very small place for information to get in and out, but by and large it's air-gapped. We have a designated work area that turns out to be by and large clean, orderly, and organized most days. so that there's very little opportunity for somebody to question the type of work that's being done. We have all of our equipment entered, is inventoried. We are switching over to a system named, I can't think of the name of it, I will think of it, a Tracker is the commercial name. Product is called Tracker. We're switching everything over to that. We are in a position in our analysis environment, I think we have 100 terabytes of disk space, where we can continue to add to it as cases go on. We have a capability for doing backups. In the next generation of the system, we were really going to work on separating the tasks. For example, we could have an evidence custodian who introduces evidence into the system and takes evidence out, and that's all they can do, et cetera, et cetera. We have a great deal of processes documented in procedures, so people know how to follow the rules. And you could be accredited. There's this notion of ASCLD certification. You could have an accredited lab. Ours is not. We'd like to, but we're working in that direction. So this is our space. These are we have three-headed Windows 7 based systems that people sit on. This is their entrance into the analysis. They're not doing analysis here. The analysis is handled in a machine room on a system that we'll talk about shortly. So each one of these, I think there's 5 of these scattered about the room. And these are storage materials here and storage here and storage here. Everybody has their own evidence safe. The combinations are changed regularly. I think mine is right here. And you can see the little tag that says they're closed versus open. These are magnetic so that you know the status of them. And you have speakers for music so that you can be amused inside when you're doing work, et cetera, et cetera. But that's built in there for evidence. What it takes to get into that is this, plus a combination to the door. So there's a 2-factor authentication to get into the system. And we have more storage within there that's the same kind of access. And not everybody has access to that. Like I don't have access to that room, which is a sub-room off our analysis environment, but I can get into the analysis environment. Okay, so that's how our system is set up, and I've seen some other analysis capabilities that look somewhat like this. Okay, preparation, policies and procedures for doing all of these kinds of things. What does it take to handle evidence? Who can do it? What's the chain of custody and all the documentation? Who has access to the facilities? When can they be accessed, et cetera, et cetera? And how about the information in the lab? Who can use it? How is it supposed to be used, et cetera, et cetera? Maintenance plans and inventory control. So essentially what you're working to do is to make an environment that nobody can say, or the likelihood of them saying is much less reduced, that you've done something wrong and compromised evidence, and the evidence can be thrown out and the case can be dismissed. So you're doing everything you can in advance to reduce the likelihood of that happening on a procedural issue. We have a mechanism for dealing with support requests that come in, of which this was a support request. The flyaway team needed to fly away and do something. Somebody had to get that request in the system. It had a budget, it had a time frame, it had a set of requirements, so there's a way of introducing those. There are processes for doing captures, protection, and how to deal with the quality of analysis, and what it means to do reports and such. And all of the data privacy issues about PII, there could be, you're capturing credit card information. You're going to be taking PII off a suspect's machine and bringing it back into your lab. Wouldn't it be terrible for your lab if that information were disclosed and all that credit card information became public because it was not handled properly? Access restrictions, segregation of data. On our system, we have multiple law enforcement agencies working on cases, and there's no possibility of cross-contamination between cases. And we can guarantee that technically through the techniques we put in place. But what happens if you're not segregated? Are there some issues associated with that? Storage and retention, what we typically do when we're done with a case is we take the disks out and we give them back to the law enforcement agency we're working with, and they take it elsewhere. We don't have long-term storage, so we don't have to worry about that. And then if all the machines that are used in the process of that, the examination machines are wiped and retasked so that there's no cross-case contamination. So in the preparation phase means doing all of these things in advance, but still recognizing that you can't do everything in advance. So you need to put yourself in a position where you can make changes in the field, on the fly, as needs to be. And all I can tell you is I've been on 4 of these missions, and I've heard the folks back at the office talk about more, and there were always things that are not anticipated. You always need to be put in a position where you can say, where's Best Buy? Or it's taking longer, or we were doing one capture in New York City. The warrant had to be served before 10 o'clock at night. And unfortunately, the suspect was not arriving. And finally, they showed up at about 5 minutes of 10. But we had a contingency plan if that didn't work. Then the process of what we were doing took until 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, the local district attorney said, the suspect is complaining, you have to leave. And so what we were faced with is a machine that we had not imaged, that we wanted to image, but we were being told to leave the facility. Okay, so what we had a portable power supply. It's called a Wiebetech, W-I-E-B-E-T-E-C. I'm not endorsing, this is simply the one we have at the lab. But it has a couple of things. You can actually connect the power, but this also has something called a mouse jiggler. So imagine you walk up to a computer system that has like full disk encryption, but it's currently, the screen lock is not kicked in, and you want to transport it back. You can deal with the power, and you can continue to jiggle the mouse so that it doesn't go into a screensaver, and you don't have to change, like the screensaver timeout, you don't have to change any of the characteristics of it. If you take a 3-prong plug a little bit out of the wall, there's a tap you can put on top of it, and then you can connect that into your portable power supply so that you can pull the plug the rest of the way out of the wall, and the machine won't lose power if it's plugged into the wall. If it's plugged into a power strip, you can plug this other portable power supply into the power strip and then pull the power strip out of the wall, and the computer that's in the power strip won't lose power, but you have to take your portable power supply with you, which means batteries. You have to make sure it's charged. And what we were going to do was the law enforcement people we were going to work with, we were going to do lights and sirens across Manhattan to get where we needed to go, all the while keeping the machine powered so that we could take it out of the suspect's place by 2 in the morning, take it back to the headquarters, image it there without losing power because there was encryption involved, and we had to have all of that set up in advance. That's all of the preparation phase. And you just don't all of a sudden say, oh, we need to do this at 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't think Best Buy is open at 1 o'clock. See what I'm saying? There's a lot of this stuff you got to think through in advance, and some of them are lessons learned. Gee, we got to turn it off. We don't have a portable power supply. We didn't charge it. We're 20 miles away from town. It's a dirt road. The power supply isn't charged enough. It's not going to work. All those sorts of issues. So don't count on anything when on site. Always put yourself in a position where you can do stuff. Comments, questions, anything anybody wants to add from their own experiences that's been missed in this?